Mother Bear found a newborn on railway tracks and rushed it to the hospital. What happened next was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning air was thick with mist as Mira walked along the old railway tracks that cut through the heart of Willowbrook Forest. She had been doing this walk for 3 years now, ever since her husband died in the train accident that claimed 17 lives. The authorities had fixed the tracks, installed new safety measures, but Mira still came here every Tuesday morning, carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers. Her boots crunched softly on the gravel between the steel rails. The forest was unusually quiet today. Even the birds seemed to be holding their breath. Mira pulled her wool coat tighter around her shoulders and quickened her pace. Something felt different this morning, though she couldn't put her finger on what. About a mile down the track, where the rails curved sharply to the left, Mira stopped. This was the spot. She knelt down and placed the flowers carefully between the ties, whispering a quiet prayer for David and the others who had lost their lives here. As she stood to leave, a sound froze her blood. A baby's cry. Faint but unmistakable. Mira's heart hammered against her ribs. She looked around frantically, trying to locate the source of the sound. The cry came again, weaker this time from somewhere deeper in the forest. Without thinking, she left the safety of the tracks and pushed through the thick undergrowth, branches catching at her clothes. The crying stopped. Mira stood perfectly still, straining to hear. Nothing but the whisper of wind through the trees. She was about to turn back when she heard something else. Something that made her skin crawl. The heavy breathing of a large animal, followed by the sound of paws moving through dry leaves. Through the morning mist, a shape emerged, massive, dark, moving with purpose. A bear, a mother bear by the size of her. And she wasn't alone. Mira pressed herself against the nearest tree, trying to become invisible. The bear was moving toward the railway tracks, and there were 2 cubs following close behind. But there was something in the bear's mouth. Something small and pale. The bear reached the tracks and gently placed her burden on the cold steel. As the mist cleared slightly, Mira's breath caught in her throat. It was a baby. A human baby, wrapped in what looked like a torn hospital blanket. The mother bear nudged the infant with her snout, then lifted her massive head and sniffed the air. Her dark eyes seemed to scan the forest, as if she was looking for something. Or someone. The 2 cubs huddled close to their mother, uncertain about this strange cargo. Mira's mind raced. How had a baby ended up out here? And why was this bear treating it with such obvious care? Bears didn't rescue human children. Bears ate human children. At least, that's what she'd always been told. The bear picked up the baby again, this time more urgently. She began to move along the tracks, heading toward town. The cubs followed, occasionally looking back as if they sensed they were being watched. Mira waited until they were out of sight before she crept back to the tracks. Where the baby had been placed, she found something that made her heart skip. Tiny drops of blood on the steel rails, but not from any injury to the baby. The blood trail led back into the forest, in the opposite direction from where the bear had emerged. Someone had been hurt. Recently. Mira followed the blood trail for about 50 yards before it disappeared into a thick patch of brambles. She was about to investigate further when she heard voices in the distance. Searchers, maybe? She quickly made her way back to the tracks and hurried toward town. She had to find that bear and that baby. The old railway line crossed 3 streets before reaching the outskirts of Willowbrook. Mira knew these woods better than anyone, having grown up here. There were several paths the bear could take, but only one that would lead directly to the town. She broke into a run, her breath coming in sharp puffs in the cold air. As she reached the edge of the forest, she could see the bear in the distance. The animal was moving more slowly now, as if she was tired, or maybe she was being careful not to harm her precious cargo. The sight was surreal. A wild bear, walking purposefully toward a human settlement, carrying a baby. Mira called out, but the bear didn't stop or even look back. If anything, she picked up her pace slightly. The cubs were having trouble keeping up now, their shorter legs working hard to match their mother's determined stride. The first houses of Willowbrook came into view. Mira saw Mrs. Henderson hanging laundry in her backyard. She was going to scream when she saw that bear, and when she screamed, others would come running. With guns. "Mrs. Henderson!" Mira shouted, but her voice was lost in the wind. The bear had reached the edge of the Hendersons' property. She paused at the white picket fence, then easily stepped over it. The baby in her mouth stirred slightly, letting out a weak cry. Mrs. Henderson turned around. For a moment, time seemed suspended. An elderly woman in a flower print dress stood face to face with a massive brown bear carrying a human infant. Neither moved. Then Mrs. Henderson dropped her laundry basket. "Henry!" she screamed. "Henry, get the gun!" The bear's ears flattened against her head, but she didn't retreat. Instead, she moved faster, lumbering across the Hendersons' perfectly manicured lawn toward the street. The cubs scrambled to follow, one of them getting momentarily tangled in the fallen clothesline. Henry Henderson burst out of the back door, shotgun in hand. He took one look at the scene and raised the weapon. "No!" Mira screamed, finally close enough to be heard. "Don't shoot! She has a baby!" Henry hesitated, confusion evident on his face. The bear was already crossing Maple Street, heading for the town center. Cars began to brake and honk. People poured out of the houses and shops. Mira reached the Hendersons' yard, gasping for breath. "Call the hospital," she panted. Tell them a bear is coming, with a baby." Mrs. Henderson stared at her as if she'd lost her mind. "A bear with a baby? Just call them," Mira shouted, already running after the bear. The streets of Willowbrook were narrow and lined with old oak trees. The bear moved with surprising grace for such a large animal, weaving between parked cars and keeping to the shadows cast by the trees. The baby had stopped crying, which worried Mira more than if it had been screaming. Behind them, the town was waking up to chaos. Sirens began to wail in the distance. People were shouting and pointing. A few brave souls were following at a safe distance, cell phones out, recording everything. The bear seemed oblivious to the commotion she was causing. Her focus was entirely on the small hospital at the end of Main Street. Willowbrook Community Hospital was a modest building, built in the 1960s and expanded twice since then. It was the only medical facility for 20 miles in any direction. As they approached the hospital, Mira noticed something odd about the bear's behavior. She kept looking up at the windows, as if she was searching for something specific. Or someone. The automatic doors of the emergency entrance slid open as the bear approached. She paused, sniffed the air, then gently placed the baby on the concrete just outside the doors. For a moment, she stood guard over the infant, her large body creating a protective barrier between the child and the growing crowd of onlookers. The baby was so still that Mira feared the worst. Then a nurse appeared in the doorway. Nina Rodriguez had been working the night shift for 8 years, but she had never seen anything like this. A massive brown bear stood protectively over a tiny human baby, as if she was presenting it to the hospital staff. "Call Dr. Martinez," Nina said quietly to her colleague without taking her eyes off the bear. "Tell him we have a situation." The bear seemed to understand that help had arrived. She took a step back, then another. The cubs, who had been hiding behind a parked ambulance, emerged and flanked their mother. Nina knelt down slowly, her hands visible, and reached for the baby. The bear watched every movement but didn't interfere. As Nina's fingers touched the infant's face, she gasped. The baby was alive, but barely. Its skin was cold and blue-tinged, hypothermia. They had minutes, maybe less. "I need a gurney," Nina shouted. "Now!" The bear took another step back as more hospital staff rushed out. She watched as they carefully lifted the baby and rushed it inside. Only then did she turn and begin to walk away. But Mira saw something in those dark bear eyes before she left. Something that looked almost like relief. As the bear and her cubs disappeared into the early morning mist, Mira noticed something glinting in the grass where the baby had been placed. She bent down and picked up a small silver locket, tarnished and dented. Inside was a photograph of a young woman with dark hair and sad eyes. On the back, in faded ink, someone had written, "For Emma, I'm sorry, please forgive me." Mira looked up at the hospital doors, then back at the forest where the bear had vanished. Whatever had happened in those woods this morning, it was far from over. The baby's cries echoed from somewhere inside the hospital, stronger now, more alive. And in the distance, barely audible above the sirens and shouting, came another sound. The mournful howl of the bear, calling out across the forest, calling for something, or someone. Who had left that baby in the woods? And why had this bear risked everything to save it? As Mira clutched the locket in her trembling fingers, she realized that the most shocking part of this story was just beginning. Inside the emergency room, chaos erupted. The baby, a girl no more than a few days old, was fighting for her life. Dr. Carlos Martinez worked frantically to warm the tiny body while nurses hooked up monitors and IV lines. The infant's vital signs were dangerously low, her breathing shallow and irregular. "Body temperature is 89 degrees, announced Nurse Rodriguez, her voice tight with concern. "Heart rate erratic. She's been exposed for hours." Dr. Martinez had delivered hundreds of babies in his 15-year career, but he had never seen anything like this. The child's umbilical cord had been crudely cut, suggesting a birth outside of medical supervision. More disturbing were the scratches on her arms, not from branches or thorns, but from something else entirely. "Nina, look at these marks," he said, pointing to the baby's left shoulder. "These aren't accidental scratches." Nina leaned closer, her eyes widening. "They look like nail marks, human nail marks." Outside in the waiting area, Mira paced nervously, the locket still warm in her palm. She had tried to give it to the hospital staff, but in the chaos of treating the baby, no one had time to listen to her story about the bear. Now, as the morning wore on, she found herself studying the photograph more closely. The woman in the picture looked familiar, though Mira couldn't place her. Something about the eyes, the shape of the face. The writing on the back was in a shaky hand, as if written by someone in distress or pain. "Excuse me, are you the woman who followed the bear?" Mira looked up to find a young man in a police uniform standing before her. Officer Jake Sullivan had the kind of fresh face that suggested he was new to the force, but his eyes held a seriousness that seemed beyond his years. "Yes, I am. I'm Mira Chen. I'm Officer Sullivan. I need to ask you some questions about what you saw this morning. The whole thing sounds pretty incredible." Mira nodded, though her attention was drawn to something behind the officer. Through the hospital's large windows, she could see movement in the parking lot. Not human movement. Something large and dark was lurking behind the cars. "Officer Sullivan," she said quietly, I think you should look outside." He turned to follow her gaze, and his hand instinctively moved to his radio. There, between a blue sedan and a pickup truck, stood the mother bear. She wasn't moving toward the building, but she wasn't leaving either. She was watching. Waiting. "Jesus," Sullivan muttered. "I thought animal control had taken care of this." "She's not hurting anyone," Mira said quickly. "She brought that baby here to save its life. Doesn't that count for something?" Before Sullivan could respond, Dr. Martinez emerged from the emergency room, his surgical scrub stained with sweat and worry. He approached them with the exhausted look of someone who had just fought a battle against death itself. "How is she?" Mira asked immediately. "Stable, for now. But I need to ask, do either of you know anything about this child's mother? We need medical history, any information about the birth." Sullivan pulled out his notepad. "That's what we're trying to figure out, Doctor. Ms. Chen here witnessed the unusual circumstances of how the baby arrived." Dr. Martinez raised an eyebrow. "You mean the bear story is actually true?" "Very true," Mira confirmed. "And she's still out there." She gestured toward the window. All three of them looked outside. The bear had moved closer to the building, her massive form now clearly visible to anyone who cared to look. Hospital staff and visitors had gathered at various windows, some taking pictures with their phones, others backing away nervously. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Martinez said, shaking his head. "In all my years of medicine, I've never seen anything like this. It's as if the animal understands what happened here." Mira held up the locket. "Doctor, I found this where the bear left the baby. There's a photograph inside and a message." Dr. Martinez took the locket carefully, opening it to examine the contents. His face went pale as he studied the photograph. "Oh my God," he whispered. "What is it?" Sullivan asked, stepping closer. "I know this woman. Her name is Emma Hartwell. She was a patient here 3 weeks ago." The color drained from Mira's face. "A patient?" "She came to the emergency room in the middle of the night, bleeding heavily. She was pregnant, maybe 8 months along. She claimed she had fallen downstairs, but the injuries—" Dr. Martinez paused, his expression darkening. "The injuries suggested something far worse than a fall." Officer Sullivan's pen hovered over his notepad. "What kind of injuries?" "Defensive wounds on her arms, bruising around her throat, signs of prolonged physical abuse." Dr. Martinez closed the locket and handed it back to Mira. "We tried to help her, but she left before we could complete the examination. Said she had to go back home." "Did she give an address?" Sullivan asked. "No, but—" Dr. Martinez hesitated. "One of our nurses, Rebecca Wong, she followed Emma outside that night. She was worried about her. Rebecca said she saw Emma get into a car with a man who seemed angry. Very angry." Mira felt a chill run down her spine. "Where's Rebecca now?" "She's working the day shift. Let me get her." As Dr. Martinez walked away, Mira and Sullivan stood in uncomfortable silence. Outside, the bear had settled into a sitting position, her cubs visible now at her side. She looked like a sentinel guarding the hospital. "Officer Sullivan," Mira said slowly, "what if Emma didn't abandon that baby willingly? What if someone took it from her?" Before he could answer, a commotion erupted at the hospital's main entrance. A man in his 30s, wearing work clothes stained with motor oil, burst through the automatic doors. He was yelling at the receptionist, demanding information about a baby that had been brought in. "That's my child," he shouted. "I have rights. You can't keep me from seeing my own baby." Sullivan's hand moved to his weapon. "Sir, I'm going to need you to calm down and—" "Don't tell me to calm down," the man snarled, spinning around to face them. His eyes were bloodshot, and the smell of alcohol hung heavy around him. Some crazy story about a bear bringing in my baby? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard." Mira studied the man's face, comparing it mentally to the photograph in the locket. There was no resemblance to Emma, but something about his demeanor set off every alarm bell in her head. "How do you know it's your baby?" she asked quietly. The man's gaze fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "Because my girlfriend gave birth 3 days ago, and now she's missing, along with my child." "Your girlfriend's name?" Sullivan asked, his pen ready. "Emma. Emma Hartwell." The silence that followed was deafening. Mira felt her heart hammering against her ribs. This was Emma's boyfriend, possibly the father of the baby, and quite possibly the reason Emma had been so desperate that she'd fled into the forest with a newborn. "Sir," Sullivan said carefully, "I'm going to need to see some identification, and then we'll need to talk about where you last saw Emma." "I don't have to tell you anything," the man spat. "I just want my baby back." It was then that Dr. Martinez returned with Rebecca Wong, a petite nurse with sharp, intelligent eyes. Rebecca took one look at the man arguing with Officer Sullivan and grabbed Dr. Martinez's arm. "That's him," she whispered urgently. "That's the man I saw Emma leave with 3 weeks ago." "Are you certain?" Dr. Martinez asked. "Absolutely. I'll never forget his face, or the way Emma looked when she got into his car. She was terrified." The man, who still hadn't given his name, seemed to sense that he was being discussed. His belligerent demeanor shifted slightly, becoming more calculating. "Look," he said, his voice taking on a false reasonableness. "There's obviously been some misunderstanding. Emma's been unstable since the pregnancy. Postpartum depression, you know." She took the baby and wandered off. "I've been looking for them for days." Mira stepped forward, surprising herself with her boldness. "If Emma has postpartum depression, shouldn't you be more concerned about finding her than claiming the baby?" The man's eyes narrowed. "Who are you, lady? This is none of your business. I made it my business when I watched a bear risk her life to save that child." "Enough of this bear nonsense," the man exploded. "Bears don't save babies. This is all some elaborate cover-up." His outburst drew the attention of everyone in the waiting area. Security guards began moving in their direction. Outside, the bear stood up, as if she too had sensed the rising tension. "Sir," Officer Sullivan said firmly, "I need you to come with me so we can sort this out properly." "I'm not going anywhere without my baby." That's when Rebecca Wong stepped forward, her face pale but determined. "Officer, there's something else you need to know about Emma's visit 3 weeks ago." All eyes turned to her. The man's face had gone from red with anger to ashen with what looked like fear. "When Emma was being examined," Rebecca continued, "she kept repeating something. She said, 'He'll kill us both. He'll kill us both if he finds us.'" The man lunged forward, reaching for Rebecca, but Sullivan was faster. In seconds, the man was on the ground, handcuffs clicking into place around his wrists. "That bitch is lying," he screamed. "She's making it all up." "The name, sir," Sullivan demanded as he hauled the man to his feet. "What's your name?" "Marcus. Marcus Thorne." Mira felt another piece of the puzzle click into place. Emma Hartwell and Marcus Thorne. A pattern of abuse that had escalated to the point where a desperate mother had fled into the forest with her newborn, only to... What? What had happened to Emma? As if reading her thoughts, Dr. Martinez voiced the question they were all thinking. "Officer Sullivan, if Emma gave birth to that baby in the forest, where is she now?" Marcus Thorne stopped struggling against the handcuffs. A smile spread across his face that chilled everyone who saw it. "That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?" he said softly. "Where is dear sweet Emma?" Outside, the bear let out a long, mournful call that seemed to echo through the very walls of the hospital. It sounded like grief, like loss, like someone crying for the dead. Mira looked out at the massive animal and felt a terrible certainty settle in her stomach. The bear hadn't just found that baby on the railway tracks. She had been there when something unspeakable happened to its mother. And now, as Marcus Thorne was led away in handcuffs, still smiling that horrible smile, Mira realized that the bear hadn't just rescued a baby. And now, as Marcus Thorne was led away in handcuffs, still smiling that horrible smile, Mira realized that the bear hadn't just rescued a baby. She had rescued the only witness to a murder. The hospital fell into an eerie quiet after Marcus was taken away. Dr. Martinez had returned to check on the baby, whose condition was slowly improving. Officer Sullivan was on his radio, calling for backup and requesting a search team for the forest. But Mira couldn't take her eyes off the bear outside. The massive animal had moved closer to the building again, her cubs staying near a group of pine trees at the edge of the parking lot. What struck Mira most was the way the bear's head kept turning toward the forest, as if she was listening for something that humans couldn't hear. "Ms. Chen?" Rebecca Wong approached her quietly. "I wanted to thank you for speaking up back there. I've been carrying the guilt of not doing more for Emma that night." Mira turned to face the nurse. What exactly happened when she left? Rebecca glanced around nervously, then sat down in the chair next to Mira. "I followed them to the parking lot. Marcos, though I didn't know his name then, he was rough with her. Grabbed her arm so hard she cried out. But when I called out to ask if she was okay, Emma just shook her head and got in the car. Did you see where they went?" "They drove toward Old Mill Road, that's all I know." Rebecca paused, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "But Miss Chen, there's something else. Something I didn't tell the officer." Mira leaned forward. "What?" "When Emma was being examined, she whispered something to me. She said she had hidden something in the forest near the train tracks. Something important. She made me promise that if anything happened to her, I would tell someone." Before Mira could respond, a commotion outside caught their attention. A van, marked Animal Control, had pulled into the parking lot, and two men in uniform were getting out with tranquilizer guns and net launchers. "No," Mira breathed, jumping to her feet. "They can't take her. Not now." She rushed outside, Rebecca close behind her. The bear had seen the van too and was backing away but slowly, as if she didn't want to leave the area. Her cubs had moved closer to her, sensing danger. "Wait," Mira called out to the animal control officers. "Please, don't hurt her." The older of the two men, a weathered fellow with gray hair, looked at her with barely concealed irritation. "Ma'am, this is a dangerous situation. That bear needs to be relocated immediately." "She's not dangerous," Mira insisted. "She brought a baby here to save its life." "Bears don't save babies, lady. They eat them." The younger officer was already raising his tranquilizer gun. That's when something extraordinary happened. The bear, instead of continuing to retreat, took several steps forward. She positioned herself between the officers and her cubs, but her posture wasn't entirely aggressive. It was almost protective of the hospital. "Don't shoot," came a voice from behind them. Officer Sullivan had emerged from the building, his hand raised. "We need that bear alive." "Officer Sullivan," the older animal control officer said, "we have our orders. Public safety comes first." "And I have a potential murder investigation," Sullivan replied firmly. "That bear may be the only witness to a crime." The animal control officers exchanged glances. You're not serious. Dead serious. I'm requesting you hold off on any action until we can search the area where the bear found the baby. While the men argued, Mira noticed something that made her heart skip. A pickup truck had pulled into the hospital parking lot, and a woman was getting out. An elderly woman with silver hair and a worried expression. The woman approached their group hesitantly. "Excuse me," she said in a shaky voice. "I heard on the radio about a baby being brought in by a bear. I think I might know something about this." Officer Sullivan turned to her immediately. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Sullivan. What's your name?" "Margaret Hartwell." "Emma. Emma is my granddaughter." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the bear seemed to sense the importance of this moment, her large head turning toward the group of humans. "Mrs. Hartwell," Sullivan said gently, "when did you last see Emma?" Margaret's eyes filled with tears. 5 days ago, she came to my house in the middle of the night. She was in labor, and she was terrified. Absolutely terrified. Dr. Martinez, who had come outside during the commotion, stepped forward. "Mrs. Hartwell, did Emma give birth at your house?" "No," Margaret shook her head. "She was too scared to stay. She said Marcus would find her there. She said he had threatened to kill her and the baby if she ever tried to leave him." The elderly woman's voice broke. "I wanted to call the police, but she begged me not to. She said it would only make things worse." Mira felt a cold dread settling in her stomach. "Where did she go?" "She took some supplies from my house, blankets, some food, a flashlight. She said she knew a place in the forest where she could hide until the baby was born. Somewhere Marcus would never think to look." Officer Sullivan was writing frantically in his notepad. "Did she say where in the forest?" "She mentioned the old railway bridge, the one that was damaged in the floods 3 years ago. She used to play there as a child." Rebecca Wong gasped. "That's near where the bear found the baby." Everyone turned to look at the bear again. She had been listening to their conversation, and now she began to move. Not away from them, but toward the edge of the parking lot, toward the forest. She stopped and looked back, as if waiting for them to follow. "She knows," Mira whispered. "She knows where Emma is." Dr. Martinez looked skeptical. "Animals don't understand human conversation." "But they understand pain," Mira replied, "and death." The bear let out another mournful call, longer and more insistent this time. Her cubs moved to flank her, and together they began walking toward the tree line. "Officer Sullivan," Margaret Hartwell said urgently, "you have to find her." Emma was so scared, so desperate. If that monster hurt her. Sullivan was already on his radio, calling for a search and rescue team. But as he spoke, Mira realized something that chilled her to the bone. If Emma had given birth in the forest 5 days ago, and the bear had found the baby this morning, where had Emma been all this time? "Mrs. Hartwell," she said quietly, "what kind of supplies did Emma take with her?" "Medical supplies, mostly. I'm a retired nurse, so I had things on hand. Sterilized scissors, gauze, antiseptic. She was determined to deliver that baby safely, no matter what." "But if she had supplies, why were the baby's injuries so—" Mira didn't finish the sentence, but everyone understood. If Emma had been prepared, if she had medical supplies, something had gone very wrong in those woods. The bear had stopped at the edge of the forest and was calling out again. This time, her cubs joined in, their smaller voices echoing through the trees. It was a sound that raised goosebumps on everyone's arms. "They're calling for her," Rebecca whispered. "They're calling for Emma." That's when they heard it. Faint, barely audible over the sound of traffic and hospital activity. Another call from deep in the forest. Not from a bear, from something else, from someone else. Margaret Hartwell went white as a sheet. That sounds like... Emma, Mira finished. Emma's still alive? Without thinking, Mira started running toward the forest, following the bear. Behind her, she could hear Officer Sullivan shouting for her to stop, but she couldn't. If Emma was alive, if she was out there injured and alone, every second counted. The bear seemed pleased that someone was finally following her lead. She picked up her pace, her cubs struggling to keep up. They moved through the underbrush with surprising grace for such large animals, following a path that seemed invisible to human eyes. Mira crashed through branches and stumbled over roots, her heart pounding with exertion and fear. Behind her, she could hear other footsteps. Officer Sullivan, Dr. Martinez, Rebecca, and Margaret had all followed her into the forest. The bear led them deeper into the woods, past the old railway tracks where Mira had first encountered her this morning. The abandoned railway bridge loomed ahead, its broken supports jutting out of the ground like broken bones. As they got closer, Mira could smell something that made her stomach turn. The metallic scent of blood mixed with the earthy dampness of the forest floor. Bear stopped suddenly, about 50 yards from the bridge. She sat down and let out a soft whine, looking back at the humans with those dark, intelligent eyes. Her cubs huddled close to her, as if they too could sense what lay ahead. "Oh, God," Dr. Martinez breathed. "There, by the bridge supports." Through the trees, they could see a makeshift shelter constructed from branches and the tattered blanket that had been wrapped around the baby. And beside it, motionless on the ground, lay a figure in blood-stained clothes. "Emma!" Margaret cried out, pushing past the others. But as they rushed toward the shelter, Mira noticed something that stopped her cold. There were footprints in the soft earth around the shelter. Large boot prints, men's boots. Marcus hadn't just found Emma after she gave birth. He had been there from the beginning. And now, as they knelt beside Emma's still form and Dr. Martinez checked for a pulse, Mira realized that the bear hadn't just been protecting a baby from the elements. She had been protecting it from its own father. "She's alive, Doctor," Martinez announced, his voice tight with urgency. "But barely. We need to get her to the hospital immediately." As Officer Sullivan called for an ambulance and a medevac helicopter, Mira looked up to see the mother bear standing guard over them all. The animal's eyes held a depth of sorrow that seemed almost human. In that moment, Mira understood. The bear had been Emma's protector in those final hours. She had witnessed the birth, witnessed the violence that followed, and when Emma could no longer care for her child, the bear had taken on that responsibility. But Emma was still breathing, still fighting. And now, with humans finally understanding the truth, maybe they could finally bring justice to the monster who had done this. As they waited for help to arrive, Emma's eyes fluttered open. She looked up at her grandmother's tear-stained face, then over at the bear who had saved her daughter's life. "Thank you," she whispered, though whether she was speaking to her grandmother or to the magnificent animal watching over them all, no one could say. The bear simply nodded, as if she understood, as if she had been waiting for this moment all along. The helicopter's rotors thundered overhead as the medical team prepared to airlift Emma to the regional trauma center. Dr. Martinez worked alongside the flight medic, stabilizing Emma's condition while Margaret held her granddaughter's hand, whispering prayers and words of comfort. "She's lost a significant amount of blood," the flight medic reported. "Looks like multiple lacerations on her abdomen and thighs. This wasn't self-inflicted." Officer Sullivan documented everything, photographing the makeshift shelter, the blood spatter patterns, and most importantly, those telltale boot prints in the mud. Each print was clear enough to match to a specific shoe, and he had a feeling they would match perfectly to the boots Marcus Thorne had been wearing when they arrested him. Meanwhile, Mira remained transfixed by the bear, who had positioned herself between the rescue operation and the forest, as if she was still protecting Emma from some unseen threat. The cubs had grown restless, occasionally wandering a few feet away before their mother would call them back with a soft grunt. "She won't leave," Rebecca observed, moving closer to Mira. "It's like she's waiting for something." Before Mira could respond, they heard thrashing in the underbrush behind them. Everyone turned, expecting to see more medical personnel, but instead, a different figure emerged from the trees. It was a man in his 60s wearing a forest ranger uniform. His face was grim, and he was carrying what looked like an evidence bag. "Officer Sullivan?" he called out. "I'm Ranger Daniel Hayes. I got your call about searching the area." Sullivan looked up from his documentation. "Find anything?" Ranger Hayes held up the bag. "You could say that. I found this about 200 yards north of here, buried under some rocks." Through the clear plastic, they could see a blood-stained knife. "There's more," Hayes continued, his voice heavy. "I found signs of a struggle near the old lumber road, broken branches, disturbed ground, and—" He paused, looking at Margaret Hartwell with sympathy. "I found pieces of torn clothing. Women's clothing." Margaret gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. "Emma's clothes. We'll need to have them analyzed, but it's likely the pattern matches what you described she was wearing when she left your house." As the ranger spoke, something extraordinary happened. The mother bear suddenly stood up and began walking toward them, not in an aggressive manner, but with purpose. She approached Ranger Hayes directly and sat down in front of him. "Well, I'll be damned," Hayes muttered. "I've never seen anything like this." The bear looked up at him, then at the evidence bag in his hands. She made a soft chuffing sound, almost like she was trying to communicate. "Daniel," Officer Sullivan said, "how long have you been working these woods?" 23 years. Why? Have you ever seen behavior like this from a bear?" Hayes shook his head slowly. "Never. Bears avoid humans at all costs. They especially don't interact with law enforcement." He looked down at the massive animal sitting calmly before him. "It's almost like she's trying to help with the investigation." Dr. Martinez, who had finished helping load Emma into the helicopter, joined their group. The flight medic said something interesting. Emma's injuries are consistent with being attacked with a blade, but there are also older injuries, healed fractures in her ribs, old burns on her arms. This abuse has been going on for a long time. "That monster," Margaret whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I knew something was wrong, but Emma always insisted everything was fine." The helicopter lifted off, taking Emma to safety. As the sound of the rotors faded, an uncomfortable silence settled over the group. That's when they heard it. The sound of vehicles approaching through the forest. "That'll be the crime scene team," Sullivan said, but his radio crackled with a different message. "Officer Sullivan, we have a problem. Marcus Thorne's lawyer is here, and he's demanding his client's immediate release. Says we don't have enough evidence to hold him." Sullivan's jaw tightened. "Tell them we're at a crime scene, and we've found the murder weapon. Sir, there's something else. Thorne is claiming he has an alibi for the last 5 days. Says he was staying with his brother in another county." Before Sullivan could respond, Ranger Hayes spoke up. "Officer, I need to show you something else I found." He pulled out his phone and showed them a photo. "I took this near the lumber road. These are tire tracks, recent ones. But here's the interesting part. There are 2 sets, one much newer than the other." "What does that mean?" Mira asked. "It means someone made multiple trips to this location. The older tracks are from about 5 days ago. The newer ones are from yesterday." A chill ran down everyone's spine. If Marcus had been in the forest yesterday, after Emma had given birth, after the baby had been taken away by the bear. "He came back," Rebecca breathed. "He came back to finish what he started." The mother bear suddenly stood up and began walking back toward the crime scene. The cubs followed, but reluctantly, as if they sensed something their mother was determined to show them. "Follow her," Mira said urgently. "She's trying to tell us something." They walked back to the makeshift shelter where the bear stopped and began pawing at the ground near a fallen log. She was digging, her massive claws pulling away dirt and leaves. "What is she doing?" Margaret asked. Within minutes, the bear had uncovered something that made everyone gasp. Partially buried in the soft earth was a cell phone, and beside it, a small digital camera. Ranger Hayes carefully retrieved both items with gloved hands. If these belonged to Emma, they might contain evidence. Officer Sullivan's radio crackled again. "Sir, we have another problem. Marcus Thorne's brother is here, and he's confirming the alibi, says Marcus was with him for the past week." "That's impossible," Sullivan muttered. But as he spoke, Mira noticed something that made her blood run cold. In the distance, through the trees, she could see a figure watching them. A man in dark clothing, standing perfectly still about 100 yards away. "Officer Sullivan," she whispered urgently, pointing toward the trees. Everyone turned to look, but the figure was already moving, disappearing deeper into the forest. The bear had seen him too, and her reaction was immediate and terrifying. She let out a roar that shook the leaves on the trees and charged in the direction where the man had been standing. "Stay back!" Sullivan shouted, drawing his weapon. He spoke into his radio. "All units, we have a possible suspect fleeing on foot through Willowbrook Forest. Male, dark clothing, last seen heading north from the crime scene." As they waited for backup, Ranger Hayes managed to power on Emma's phone. The screen was cracked but functional. "Officer, you need to see this." The phone's gallery contained dozens of photos and videos, but the most recent ones made everyone's stomach turn. They were images of Emma in the makeshift shelter, clearly taken without her knowledge. Someone had been watching her, documenting her, while she struggled to survive and give birth alone in the forest. "These photos were taken over several days," Hayes said grimly. "Someone was stalking her." Dr. Martinez looked at the timestamps. "This is from 3 days ago, and this one from 2 days ago." He paused, his face pale. "This last one was taken yesterday morning." Yesterday morning, hours before the bear had brought the baby to the hospital. He's been watching this whole time, Mira realized. Marcus has been watching Emma die. But then Rebecca looked more closely at one of the photos. "Wait, look at this one." She pointed to an image that showed not just Emma, but someone else in the frame. A partial view of a man's hand holding the camera. "That's not Marcus's hand," she said with certainty. "Marcus has a scar on his right hand from a work accident. I remember seeing it when he was yelling at Emma in the hospital parking lot. This hand doesn't have a scar." Officer Sullivan felt a cold realization wash over him. If Marcus has an alibi and these photos prove someone else was stalking Emma, then we're dealing with two people, Mira finished. Marcus and someone else. Someone who's been helping him. The bear returned from her chase, panting heavily. She hadn't caught whoever had been watching them, but her message was clear. The danger wasn't over. As if to confirm their worst fears, Sullivan's radio crackled with an update that sent chills through everyone present. "Officer Sullivan, we have a situation at the hospital. A man matching Marcus Thorne's description was seen near the pediatric ward asking about the baby. But sir, Marcus Thorne is still in custody. This was someone else. In the distance, they could hear the bear calling out again, but this time her calls were answered. From deep in the forest came the unmistakable sounds of multiple animals responding. Other bears, a whole family of them. Mira looked around at the group of humans standing in the forest, suddenly very aware of how vulnerable they were. "We need to get back to the hospital," she said urgently. "Now," because whoever was after Emma and her baby was still out there, and now he knew exactly where to find them. As they hurried back through the forest, the mother bear and her cubs following close behind, none of them noticed the small recording device hidden in the branches above Emma's shelter. The red light was still blinking, documenting every word they had spoken. Someone had been listening to everything, and now they knew exactly how much the authorities had discovered. The hunt was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. By the time they reached the hospital, chaos had erupted. Police cars surrounded the building, their lights painting the walls in alternating red and blue. Officer Sullivan's radio was crackling with constant updates, each one more disturbing than the last. "The suspect approached the pediatric ward claiming to be the baby's uncle," came the voice from dispatch. "Security footage shows him talking to several staff members before disappearing. We're reviewing all cameras now." Mira felt her heart pounding as they rushed through the emergency entrance. The mother bear had stopped at the edge of the parking lot again, but this time she seemed more agitated. Her cubs pressed close to her sides while she paced back and forth, occasionally looking up at the hospital windows. "She knows," Mira said to Dr. Martinez, who was walking beside her. "She knows there's still danger." Inside, the hospital was in controlled chaos. Extra security guards patrolled the hallways, and all access to the pediatric ward had been restricted. Nina Rodriguez met them at the nurses' station, her face pale with worry. "Dr. Martinez, thank God you're back. The baby is fine, but we had a scare. A man came asking about her about an hour ago. He had identification claiming to be Marcus Thorne's brother, but when security tried to verify it, he just disappeared." Officer Sullivan stepped forward. "Did he give a name?" "Brian Thorne. But here's the strange part. When we called the phone number on his ID to verify, Marcus's actual brother answered. He said he'd never heard of anyone named Brian, and that Marcus only had one brother, him." Rebecca Wong, who had been quiet during their trek back from the forest, suddenly spoke up. "I remember something. During one of Emma's visits, she mentioned that Marcus had a business partner, someone who helped him with his auto repair shop. She seemed afraid of this person, too." "A partner?" Sullivan was taking notes rapidly. "Did she give a name?" "No, but she said this man was even worse than Marcus. She called him the Shadow because he was always lurking around, watching everything." Dr. Martinez's pager buzzed urgently. He checked it, and his face went ashen. "Emma's in surgery at the trauma center. Her condition is worse than we initially thought. There's internal bleeding we didn't catch, and—" He paused, looking around at the group. "She's asking for her baby. She keeps saying someone is coming for the baby." As if summoned by their conversation, a commotion erupted outside. Through the large windows, they could see the mother bear had moved closer to the building. She was standing on her hind legs, pawing at the glass, and making distressed sounds that could be heard even through the thick walls. "That's not normal bear behavior," Ranger Hayes observed. "She's trying to warn us about something." That's when the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in immediately, bathing the hospital in an eerie red glow. The security alarm began wailing, and staff members rushed to follow lockdown protocols. Over the intercom, a voice announced, "This is a security alert. All personnel and visitors remain in place. Do not approach exterior doors or windows. "Someone cut the main power," Sullivan said into his radio. "Request immediate backup to all hospital entrances." In the dim red lighting, Mira saw something that made her blood freeze. A figure was moving past the windows on the second floor. Someone was already inside the building, and they were heading toward the pediatric ward. "Dr. Martinez," she said urgently, grabbing his arm. "Someone's in the building, second floor, moving toward pediatrics." Before anyone could respond, they heard the sound of breaking glass from somewhere above them. The bear outside went wild, roaring and clawing at the building's exterior walls. "He's here," Rebecca whispered. "The shadow is here." Officer Sullivan drew his weapon and spoke rapidly into his radio. "Suspect in the building, second floor. All units converge on pediatric ward. We need that baby protected at all costs." As they rushed toward the elevators, Ranger Hayes grabbed Mira's arm. "Ms. Chen, I need to tell you something about those photos on Emma's phone. I didn't want to say it in front of her grandmother, but the timestamps don't just show when they were taken, they show when they were uploaded." "Uploaded where?" "To a cloud storage account. Someone has been sharing these images. This isn't just about Marcus and his partner. This is something bigger." The elevator doors opened, revealing a man in hospital scrubs. But something was wrong with his appearance. The scrubs were too large, and there were dark stains on the fabric that looked suspiciously like dirt from the forest floor. "Going up?" the man asked with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Officer Sullivan's hand was already on his weapon. "Step out of the elevator, sir." The man's smile faded. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding. You're under arrest for breaking and entering, and possibly much more." But as Sullivan moved to apprehend him, the man pulled something from his pocket. It wasn't a weapon. It was a small device that looked like a remote control. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, officer," the man said calmly. "You see, I've placed some insurance policies around this hospital. One press of this button and things could get very messy." Dr. Martinez stepped forward. "What do you want?" "I want what's rightfully mine. That baby belongs to my partner, and I intend to take her home." "Marcus is your partner?" Mira asked, though she already suspected the answer would be more complicated. The man laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Marcus? That idiot couldn't plan his way out of a paper bag. No, I've been the brains behind this operation from the beginning. Marcus just provided the muscle and the cover story." Rebecca spoke up, her voice shaking. "You're Brian Thorne, the fake ID." "Very good, nurse, though that's not my real name. I've had to use many names over the years. My real name is David Kellerman, and I've been watching Emma for a very long time." The name hit Mira like a physical blow. Kellerman, the same last name as Emma's mother, who had died when Emma was young. "You're related to Emma," she realized. Her stepfather, to be precise. "I married her mother when Emma was 7 years old. Such a beautiful child she was. So trusting." His eyes took on a distant, disturbing look. Her mother never understood our special relationship. Dr. Martinez felt sick. "You abused Emma when she was a child. I loved her, but her mother poisoned her against me. When Emma turned 18, she ran away. I spent years looking for her, and when I finally found her, she was with Marcus." Kellerman's expression darkened. "I convinced Marcus to help me watch her, to keep her close. And when she got pregnant, well, I saw an opportunity to have the family I always wanted." Officer Sullivan was slowly moving his hand toward his weapon, but Kellerman noticed. "Ah ha ha ha," Kellerman warned, holding up the remote. "Like I said, one button press and this hospital becomes very dangerous for everyone inside. Outside, The mother bear's roars were becoming more urgent. Through the windows, they could see her trying to climb the building's exterior, her claws scraping against the brick and concrete. "What did you do to Emma in the forest?" Mira demanded. "I helped her deliver the baby, of course. I have medical training. I was a paramedic before I started my current business. But Emma was ungrateful. She tried to keep the child from me. We had a disagreement. You tortured her. I tried to convince her to see reason, but she was stubborn, just like her mother. When she still refused to cooperate, I decided to take more direct action." The elevator suddenly lurched, and the lights flickered. Through the shaft, they could hear the sound of metal groaning under stress. "What was that?" Dr. Martinez asked. That's when they realized the bear wasn't just trying to climb the building. She was trying to break into it. The mother bear had somehow accessed the hospital's maintenance areas and was working her way through the building's infrastructure. The sound of tearing metal grew louder, and dust began falling from the ceiling. "That's impossible," Ranger Hayes breathed. "Bears can't navigate building systems." "This bear can," Mira said with certainty. "She's been protecting Emma and the baby from the beginning. She's not going to stop now." Kellerman's confident demeanor began to crack. "This is ridiculous. It's just an animal." But his words were cut off by a tremendous crash from above. The bear had broken through something significant, and now they could hear her moving through the walls themselves. The ventilation system, Dr. Martinez realized. She's using the air ducts. Officer Sullivan took advantage of Kellerman's momentary distraction and lunged forward, grabbing the remote from his hand. Kellerman tried to fight back, but in the confined space of the elevator, Sullivan had the advantage. As they wrestled, the remote fell to the floor and shattered. "You don't understand," Kellerman gasped as Sullivan pinned him down. "I'm not the only one. There are others. This is bigger than just Emma." "What others?" But before Kellerman could answer, the lights went out completely. Not emergency lighting this time. Total darkness. And in that darkness, they heard something that chilled them to the bone. The sound of a baby crying. But the baby was supposed to be safely in the pediatric ward, several floors away. Someone else had already taken her. "No," Mira whispered into the darkness. "No, no, no." The mother bear's roars echoed through the building. Closer now, filled with a rage that seemed to shake the very foundations. The real hunt was only just beginning, and somewhere in the dark corridors of the hospital, a predator was escaping with his prize. But he hadn't counted on one thing. A mother's love knows no species. And this mother bear was far from finished. The darkness lasted only moments, but those moments felt like an eternity. When the emergency generators finally kicked in, bathing the hospital in dim amber light, Officer Sullivan found himself alone in the elevator with an unconscious David Kellerman. But Mira, Doctor, Martinez, Rebecca, and Ranger Hayes were gone. "All units," Sullivan radioed. "Suspects and civilians missing from elevator, and we have confirmation. The baby has been taken." What he didn't know was that when the lights went out, the mother bear had broken through the ventilation system directly above them. In the chaos and darkness, she had done something extraordinary. She had communicated with the humans in her own way, leading them through a maintenance passage that only she seemed to know existed. Mira found herself crawling through a narrow space behind Dr. Martinez, following the sound of the bear's movements ahead of them. The metallic smell of the air ducts mixed with something else, the bear's scent, which somehow felt comforting rather than threatening. "Where is she taking us?" Rebecca whispered. Their answer came when they emerged onto the hospital's roof. The night air was crisp and clear, and the mother bear was standing at the edge, looking down at the parking lot below. Her cubs had somehow made it up here, too, and they were clustered around what looked like a bundle of blankets. The baby. Somehow, the bear had rescued her again. But they weren't alone on the roof. Standing near the rooftop access door was another figure. A woman in her 50s with graying hair and kind eyes. She was holding the baby gently, speaking to her in soft, soothing tones. "Who are you?" Dr. Martinez demanded. The woman looked up, tears streaming down her face. "My name is Dr. Sarah Chen. I'm a pediatrician from the county hospital, but more importantly..." She paused, looking at the baby in her arms. "I'm Emma's mother." The silence that followed was deafening. "That's impossible," Mira breathed. "Emma's mother is dead." Dr. Chen shook her head sadly. "That's what we needed David to believe. When Emma was 10 years old, I found out what he was doing to her. I tried to leave him, but he threatened to kill us both. So we faked my death and went into hiding through the witness protection program." The pieces began falling into place. "Emma didn't know you were alive? We thought it was safer if she believed I was gone. David stopped looking for us eventually, and we were able to start new lives. But I never stopped watching over her from a distance." Dr. Chen's voice broke. "When I learned that David had found her again, had been using Marcus to control her, I knew I had to act." Ranger Hayes stepped forward. "You're part of the witness protection program." "I was, but when I saw what was happening to my daughter, I broke protocol. I've been tracking David's movements, documenting his crimes. I have evidence of everything, the trafficking network, the other victims, all of it." Dr. Martinez looked confused. "But how did you get here? How did you know about the baby?" Dr. Chen smiled through her tears, looking at the mother bear who was watching them all with those intelligent dark eyes. "She told me." "What do you mean?" 3 days ago, this bear appeared at my cabin in the mountains. She had traveled over 50 miles to find me. She kept returning, trying to lead me somewhere. Finally, I followed her, and she brought me to Emma's shelter in the forest." Mira felt goosebumps rise on her arms. "The bear knew Emma was your daughter?" "Animals sense things we can't understand. When I saw my granddaughter being born, saw what David had done to Emma, I knew I couldn't hide anymore. I called the FBI, told them where David could be found. But I also knew Emma and the baby would need more immediate protection." The sound of helicopters filled the air. Both police and FBI aircraft were converging on the hospital. Dr. Chen continued, "I've been working with federal agents for weeks, building a case against David's entire organization. They're not just traffickers. They're a network of abusers who target vulnerable women and children." Officer Sullivan's voice crackled through Ranger Hayes's radio. "All suspects in custody. We found a whole operation in the basement of that auto repair shop. Multiple victims, extensive evidence of trafficking." The mother bear approached Dr. Chen slowly, gently touching the baby with her massive paw. For a moment, 3 generations were connected: grandmother, granddaughter, and the wild animal who had brought them together. "Emma?" Dr. Martinez asked urgently. "What about Emma?" Dr. Chen's face brightened. "She's stable. More than stable. She's awake and she's asking for her baby and..." She paused, emotion overwhelming her. "She's asking for her mother." As the first of the FBI agents reached the roof, Dr. Chen handed the baby to Dr. Martinez. "Take her to Emma. Tell my daughter that her mother never stopped loving her, never stopped watching over her." "Aren't you coming?" Mira asked. "I will, but first, I need to thank someone." Dr. Chen turned to the mother bear, who was preparing to leave with her cubs. The massive animal looked at her for a long moment, as if she understood that her job was finished. "Thank you," Dr. Chen whispered, reaching out to touch the bear's fur. "Thank you for saving them both." The bear seemed to nod. Then she and her cubs disappeared over the edge of the roof, climbing down the building with the same impossible grace they had used to climb up. 6 months later, Mira stood in the meadow where she had first encountered the mother bear. Emma was there too, healthy and strong, holding her daughter who was now crawling and laughing in the warm spring sunshine. Dr. Chen, who was now going by her real name again, was preparing a picnic lunch while Officer Sullivan, who had become a close friend to them all, played peekaboo with the baby. The trial had been a sensation. David Kellerman and his network had been exposed, bringing justice to dozens of victims. Marcus Thorne had testified against the organization in exchange for a reduced sentence, finally breaking free from Kellerman's manipulation. But the most remarkable testimony had come from the bear experts who studied the footage from the hospital's security cameras. Dr. Elizabeth Reeves, a leading animal behaviorist, had declared it the most extraordinary example of interspecies cooperation ever documented. "What that bear did," she had told the court, "defies everything we thought we knew about animal intelligence and maternal instinct. She didn't just rescue a baby, she orchestrated a complex rescue operation involving multiple humans." As Mira watched Emma play with her daughter, she heard a familiar sound from the tree line, a soft, chuffing noise that made everyone look up. There, at the edge of the meadow, stood the mother bear and her cubs. They were larger now, the cubs almost adult-sized. The mother bear looked across the meadow at Emma and her baby, then settled down in the shade to watch over them from a distance. Emma noticed too and waved at the bear family. "Thank you," she called out, her voice carrying on the breeze. The bear seemed to understand. She raised her massive head once, as if acknowledging the thanks, then lay down with her cubs to rest. Dr. Chen put her arm around her daughter. "She's still protecting you." "She always will," Emma replied softly. "Some bonds go beyond species, beyond understanding. She saved more than just my baby's life that day. She saved our entire family." As the sun set behind the trees, casting long shadows across the meadow, Mira reflected on everything that had happened. A chance encounter with a bear on railway tracks had led to the exposure of a criminal network, the reunion of a mother and daughter who had been separated for years, and the safety of a baby who would grow up knowing she was loved and protected by the most unlikely guardian. The mother bear lifted her head one last time, looking across the meadow at the humans who had become part of her extended family. In her dark eyes, Mira saw something that would stay with her forever. Love. Pure, unconditional, protective love that knew no boundaries. And as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the bear's gentle rumble carried across the meadow like a lullaby, promising that some guardians never stop watching, never stop caring, never stop protecting those they love. The baby fell asleep in her mother's arms, safe in the knowledge that she was surrounded by love, human and wild. And in the forest nearby, a legend was born. The legend of the mother bear of Willowbrook, who proved that heroes come in all forms, and that sometimes the most fierce love comes from the most unexpected places. Years later, when Emma's daughter was old enough to understand, she would be told the story of how a bear saved her life. And she would grow up knowing that in this world, there are always guardians watching over us. Some walk on 2 legs, some walk on 4. But all of them love without condition, protect without question, and never give up hope. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's enough to change the world.